Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books in Bytes. Today we're doing a deep dive into the Kama Sutra.
It's a book.
It's a book
Yeah.
that I think a lot of people have heard of. Um, Maybe not many have read.
Yes, most people associate it with, just the sexual positions.
Yeah,
Which it does have, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah, so for those who might be a little bit in the dark, can you give us a quick rundown of what this book is actually all about?
Sure. At its core, it's a guide to living a fulfilling and pleasurable life. Not just about sex, but it's about virtue and success and really living a good life within society.
So it's a bit more holistic than people might think.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, okay. So the book starts off by describing kind of the education and skills a citizen should have.
Yeah.
And they should acquire. And it's not just reading and writing or anything like that. There's this whole list of 64 arts, from singing and dancing, knowing how to make perfumes, writing in cipher, even training parrots to speak. It's a very interesting list.
It is, and these arts were considered essential for someone to be well-rounded and to navigate social situations and just succeed in life in general.
Yeah, and so, training parrots to speak, I don't know, seems a little bit more like a party trick than an essential life skill.
Well, think about, this was a time when entertaining social gatherings played a really important role.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the impression you could make at a party if you have a parrot that could recite poetry.
Yeah, that would definitely make you stand out.
Or engage in some witty banter.
Yeah. So it seems like there's a lot of emphasis on kind of cultivating a refined and pleasurable lifestyle. The book even describes a citizen's house as having separate rooms for men and women, elaborate beds, gardens filled with swings and bowers. It all sounds very luxurious.
Yeah, and luxury and refinement were highly valued, and it reflected, not just wealth, but good taste and just a deep appreciation for the finer things in life.
And we can't forget all the descriptions of grooming routines, specific schedules for bathing and oiling the body, shaving, even removing armpit sweat.
All very important. And these meticulous grooming rituals were essential for men and women.
Really?
Yes. And they reflect just the importance placed on physical attractiveness and how important the senses were in experiencing pleasure.
Okay, so it's interesting how they kind of tie all of this together.
Yeah.
Acquiring knowledge, refining your lifestyle, attending to your appearance. It's like this holistic approach to living a good life.
Exactly. Each aspect contributes to a person's well-being and their ability to really have good relationships, both social and romantic.
Okay, so let's talk about what I think most people probably think about when they think about the Kama Sutra, and that's the sexual unions. And the book is surprisingly detailed, and it classifies unions based on the size of the partner's genitals and their level of passion. So we're talking about hare, bull, and horse categories here.
It sounds a little strange to us, but I mean, this is ancient India, and they had a certain frankness when it came to the human body. And they believed that compatibility in these areas was really important for a satisfying and harmonious sexual experience.
Yeah, it's really interesting how they kind of identify these 9 different types of unions based on these combinations. And they say that the most ideal is equal unions.
Right. And it really emphasizes that a truly satisfying sexual experience goes beyond just the physical. It's about this balance exchange of energy, desire, and pleasure between both partners.
Now, the book also talks about some things that even today, some people might consider taboo. And there's a whole discussion on female ejaculation, and they present different opinions on that subject.
Yes. And this is where Vatsyayana, the author, shows real nuance.
Yeah.
He presents various perspectives, but ultimately he concludes that while men and women experience pleasure differently, the intensity and the significance of that experience is basically the same.
Which is a pretty progressive viewpoint, I think, for the time.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
And again, it just highlights the book's focus on understanding the complexities of human sexuality and promoting a balanced and fulfilling experience for both partners.
Now, we all know that relationships, even back in those days, weren't always smooth sailing.
Of course.
And the Kama Sutra dedicates a whole section to love quarrels and how to reconcile. Yeah. It's almost like a guide to navigating a relationship.
Yeah, it suggests approaches for both men and women and encourages, communication, understanding, compromise.
Yeah.
These are all things that we still talk about today.
Yeah. There's this one part that's kind of memorable. The author suggests that women, they hear everything said to them by men, but they sometimes choose to stay silent, which I think is very interesting.
It is, and it kind of hints at the level of awareness that women had,
Yeah.
even within a patriarchal society.
Okay. So speaking of navigating complex social situations, the book talks about courtesans. And it's really insightful how they talk about them because they weren't seen as these outcasts. They played a very big role in society.
Yes. The Kama Sutra dedicates a lot of time to courtesans.
Yeah.
It highlights their education, their skills in the arts, and even their financial independence.
Yeah, they were like the entrepreneurs of the time.
Yes, exactly.
And there's even a list of 24 types of men that are attracted to courtesans.
Yeah.
From the wealthy to those seeking intellectual stimulation or even refuge from, unhappy marriages.
And that just shows you that a courtesan's appeal wasn't just based on physical attraction. It really speaks to their ability to provide companionship, intellectual engagement, and a range of experiences that were just outside the boundaries of society, conventional society.
It's like no matter how rigid a social structure might seem, there's always going to be these human desires and relationships that go beyond how society thinks they should be.
Absolutely. And the Kama Sutra embraces that. It doesn't shy away from it. And it offers a nuanced perspective on the multifaceted nature of relationships.
So I think we've covered quite a bit.
We have.
From, acquiring knowledge, this refined lifestyle, and then even the complexities of sexual relationships and courtesans.
Yes.
And it's clear that the Kama Sutra is so much more than what most people might think it is.
Definitely. It's not just the sex manual. It's a window into this, complex society. And it's interesting to think about how these insights are relevant even today.
Yeah, it makes you think, huh?
It does.
All right, well, stay tuned for part 2 of this deep dive. We'll be back to explore the Kama Sutra's advice on marriage, the conduct of wives, and the art of seduction.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Kama Sutra.
Okay, so in this part, we're going to shift focus a little bit and look at what the book says about marriage and family life.
Yes.
Which I have to admit, I was pretty surprised by how much attention it gives to those topics.
Yeah.
It's not all just about, fleeting romances and just, having fun.
Right.
There's this emphasis on building a stable and fulfilling domestic life.
Absolutely. And you have to remember that marriage in ancient India, it was like the sacred duty. It was essential for fulfilling your dharma. It ensured that the family lineage continued.
Yeah.
And it maintained social order.
Okay, so it's a lot more than just, finding love and happiness. It sounds like there's this deeper, societal and spiritual significance attached to it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about the role of the wife. What does the book say about what a wife should be?
Well, the ideal wife is described as, devoted to her husband. His happiness and well-being are the most important things to her. She manages the household, keeps everything clean, organized, running smoothly.
Sounds like a big job.
Yeah.
So does that mean that women were just kind of confined to this domestic space?
Well, while the book does emphasize a wife's responsibilities at home, it also, it acknowledges her importance in creating a happy home environment. And remember, the book is all about, it emphasizes this interconnectedness of Dharma, Artha, and Kama.
Yeah.
And, a well-managed household that helps the husband with his worldly success and his ability to enjoy, those sensual pleasures.
So it's not just about being subservient. It's like you're a partner.
Yes,
Okay.
definitely. And each spouse has an important role to play in achieving those 3 goals.
Now, the book also mentions that the wife should be educated and refined. It suggests that a husband should encourage his wife. If she has intellectual pursuits or artistic talents, he should encourage her in those things.
Absolutely. And that's pretty progressive for the time, wouldn't you say?
I would, yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like a marriage is more than just these, practical duties. It's about shared interests and just mutual respect for each other.
Exactly.
So I know that back then, polygamous marriages were a thing.
They were very common.
So how does the book deal with that? Navigating those dynamics must have been, really tricky.
Well, it gives specific guidance for the elder wife and the younger wives.
Okay.
The elder wife, she's expected to act like a matriarch. She guides the younger wives.
Yeah.
But she also makes sure that the household is running smoothly.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like a tough, that's got to be a tough job.
Yeah.
Because there's probably a lot of jealousy and rivalry.
Right. And the book, It knows that these are challenges, so it advises the elder wife to be fair and just to everybody, to avoid favoritism, and to make sure everybody gets along.
Yeah.
To treat each wife with respect and to recognize that each of them has unique qualities.
So the elder wife really needs to have those diplomacy skills.
Yes.
Okay, so what about the younger wives? What do they have to do?
Well, they're supposed to treat the elder wife with respect, almost like a mother figure.
Mhm.
They're also supposed to help take care of her children, help her manage the house.
So it's kind of this hierarchy.
Yeah.
But it seems like they were trying to make it work for everybody.
Yeah, it recognizes that polygamy had its own challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And the guidelines were really there to minimize conflict.
Okay. So it's not just about the wives, though, right? The book also has advice for the husbands on how to manage a household with multiple wives.
Yes, and again, it stresses fairness.
Mm-hmm.
He has to avoid showing favoritism and make sure that each of his wives feels valued and appreciated.
So, I mean, that sounds like a whole other job in itself.
Right, and it does take, a high degree of emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
and you have to be committed to maintaining that balance within the family.
Mm-hmm.
And the book recognizes that a polygamous marriage that's successful, it's not just about, providing for them materially.
Right.
It's about understanding each wife's emotional needs and fostering a sense of harmony in the house.
Okay, so now I know that the book is all about marriage and family, but it also knows that not all relationships end up in marriage.
Right, of course not.
And so it has this whole section on seduction, on strategies for winning over a woman.
Yes.
Which is pretty interesting because it shows us like how people thought about attraction and courtship back then.
Mm-hmm. It really does.
So what kind of advice does it give? Does it have any like timeless tips that our modern day Romeos could use?
Well, the most important thing it says is that you have to understand the woman, her nature, her preferences,
Mm-hmm.
and it categorizes women into types based on personality, temperament, desires.
So there's no one right way to go about it.
No, exactly. And it encourages men to, tailor their approach to the specific woman. You have to understand what makes her unique, what she finds attractive, and what you can do to win her over.
It's all about personalization.
Yeah.
Okay, so the book, it actually gives a list of 24 types of men that are successful with women. What are we talking about here?
Well, the list it's pretty diverse.
Mm-hmm.
Some men are skilled in the arts of lovemaking. Some are eloquent, witty. It highlights the importance of physical attractiveness, confidence, bravery, generosity.
It sounds like, I don't know, like the perfect, like romantic hero, even for today.
Right. And it suggests that attraction, it happens because of a lot of factors, internal and external.
Mm-hmm.
And the Kama Sutra recognizes that seduction is this like complex dance. You need to be aware of social cues, you need emotional intelligence, and, a little bit of strategy.
Yeah, okay. So the book gives some more specific strategies for winning over a woman, even if she's not that into you at first. Like what are some of the things they suggest?
Well, one thing it suggests is using intermediaries.
Okay.
So you could ask mutual friends or female relatives or even servants to talk you up and kind of, influence how she sees you.
So it's kind of like social engineering.
In a way, yes. And it shows how important your reputation was, your social network. You're not just trying to win over her, you're trying to win over the people around her.
Okay. So besides intermediaries, they talk about gift giving.
Yes.
Which, today it might seem a little weird or whatever, but I guess back then it was like this token of affection.
Exactly. A way to show you're sincere, you're committed.
Okay.
And the book says to give gifts that are meaningful, that are tailored to her interests, whether it's jewelry, clothing, or even just something practical that shows you pay attention to her needs.
So it's not about like how expensive it is.
Right.
It's the thought behind it.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. What other like direct approaches are there?
Well, it tells men to show off their talents. So, if you can sing, dance, tell stories, even do magic tricks, do it.
Yeah, I guess like show your best side.
Right. The idea is to get her attention, create that sense of awe.
Mm-hmm. Make her want to know more about you.
Exactly. The Kama Sutra recognizes that attraction, a lot of times it comes from intrigue.
Yeah. Okay. The book, it even gives advice on how to have conversations with a potential love interest.
Mm-hmm.
So any tips there?
Be engaging, be witty, ask questions, show that you're genuinely interested in her and what she thinks and what her experiences are. Don't dominate the conversation. Don't brag. Be a good listener.
So active listening. Important back then, too.
Oh, absolutely. You know, the Kama Sutra recognizes that to build a connection, there has to be mutual respect.
Yeah, you can't just be all about yourself.
No.
Okay, so now I'm kind of curious. Does the book talk about any, like, awkward situations? Like, let's say you're trying to get to know a woman, but you have to deal with her family or chaperones.
It does. And it says to be respectful, courteous,
Yeah.
even try to win them over, find common ground, have polite conversation, maybe even give them small gifts.
Like, you're serious about this. It's not just,
Oh, right, you're not just playing around.
Yeah, you're not just trying to, have some fun.
Yeah, and it really recognizes that courtship. Sometimes it means navigating these really complex social relationships.
So I think we've gone over quite a bit here, from the role of the wife to these, polygamous households, and then how to get a woman to like you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's clear that the Kama Sutra, it gives us this really interesting look into how love and relationships and social dynamics all worked back then.
Yeah, and it reminds us that, things change, cultural norms and practices change, but the basics of what we want as human, like connection and intimacy and fulfillment, those never really go away.
Yeah, and maybe the Kama Sutra encourages us to look at all of these things, love, sexuality, relationships, with a bit more of an open mind.
Absolutely.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Kama Sutra.
Yeah.
So in this final part, we're going to get into some of the more controversial stuff in the book. The things that make people kind of raise an eyebrow.
Yeah.
Maybe even blush a little bit.
Yeah, there are definitely some sections in the book that deal with topics that today we might consider taboo. But we have to remember that this was written centuries ago.
Yeah.
Totally different cultural context.
Right. So instead of judging everything by, like, our modern standards, let's try to see it through their eyes.
Exactly. I mean, the Kama Sutra, yes, it's all about pleasure, but it also emphasizes discretion, respect, understanding relationships.
Right. Okay, so let's get into it. We already talked about courtesans, but the Kama Sutra, it actually describes some pretty specific sexual practices that even back then might have been considered a little bit out there.
Yeah, for example, using objects to enhance pleasure.
Okay.
So we're talking about dildos made from, like, wood or ivory or even certain fruits. It mentions rings or other things worn on the penis to make erections last longer or to heighten sensations.
Okay, so this is all stuff that, probably wasn't really talked about openly.
Yeah, most likely it was limited to certain groups. The Kama Sutra describes it, but it doesn't say that everybody was doing it.
Yeah, okay.
Keep in mind, the book is really for a sophisticated audience who want to refine their experience.
Okay, so the Kama Sutra also gets into magic and potions.
Oh, yes.
Especially for love.
Yes.
So attracting a partner, better sex, even becoming invisible. Like, it's wild.
Right. And it shows you what people believed back then, how they tried to get what they wanted.
Yeah, and some of these potions, like animal parts, plants.
Bodily fluids, the whole works.
I mean, it's crazy. So I guess back then, they didn't have science to explain things, right?
Well, and people wanted to control their lives.
Yeah.
Their love lives, their destinies. I mean, those are things people still want today.
So we've reached the end of our deep dive. What do you think are the key takeaways for our listeners?
I'd say don't forget, the Kama Sutra is more than just a sex manual. It's about living a good life. Pleasure is a part of it, but also virtue, success, relationships.
Yeah, and it gives us this look into a culture that we don't really know that much about.
Absolutely. And you know what? It makes us think about our own ideas about love and sex and relationships.
Yeah.
I mean, human desire, the search for happiness, those never go out of style, even if how we do things is different now.
Maybe the Kama Sutra is telling us to just be a little more open-minded about it all.
I like that. I think that's a great takeaway because, the Kama Sutra has this reputation, but really it's celebrating life in all its richness and variety.
Yeah. Pleasure and virtue. It's all part of the journey.
Well said.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the Kama Sutra. Thanks for coming along with us on this journey.
Yeah, it's been fun.
We hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe an ancient text can teach us something about ourselves even today. Till next time.